Any program within the government has a lot of the same challenges. We have budget constraints. We have regulations that we have to abide by, to our primary stakeholder, the customers, the taxpayers. We have schedule constraints. But one of the unique things out at Pad B is, like I mentioned before, the size of it. We had to do a lot of these projects in series. We could not do a lot of these things at the same time because they were literally on top of each other. So we've had to schedule things and phase our construction and facilities budget, our CFF budget, into those years so that we could execute these projects one at a time. One of the other challenges out there at the pad is because, like I mentioned, it's 50 years old. A lot of things were built then. Documentation is not the same as it is nowadays. We didn't have all the electronic drawings. We didn't have everything. And the people that did it originally aren't around anymore. So there's been a lot of surprises as we go through construction. If you've known anyone or yourself have ever bought a beautiful historic home and with envision of renovating it, you know that you're going to have surprises. When you tear off the wallpaper and you pick up the floor, the carpet, some of those surprises are wonderful. Oh, I have beautiful hardwood floors under this carpet. Some of them are not so wonderful, and you have to stop what you're doing and remediate that. We've had a number of those. Our site conditions out at the pad have continued to surprise us. When we go start a project, we think we do everything we can to figure out what's there, go through historical drawings, and every time we get into construction, there's something there that has surprised us. We've had a couple of fun ones that have surprised us. We had, when we were doing the demolition of the fixed service structure, rotating service structure, they were also taking the side flame deflectors and they were torch cutting them. And they were just going through it, and then they stopped what they were doing, and because they were seeing something unusual and they didn't understand, and so the first thing they do is they stop and they ask us the questions. And they said, we're seeing something in the structure as we're cutting it, and it looks unusual. And they said, it looks like bird feathers. We said, well, we have steel structure that's covered with, heavy paint, but why would there be feathers in a steel structure? And so we went out and looked at it. Sure enough, it looked like bird feathers, and no one understood why there would be bird feathers in a structure. And we talked to some people that were the system experts, and they said, one of them said, I remember hearing something about this, that they used a layer of bird feathers as a thermal layer in the system, and it was not in any of the documentation. It was not anything anyone would have expected, but it happened. And we find things when we go through these jobs. We have the pad surface it's not a hill like a lot of people think. They think it's just a hill in Brevard County, and if you've ever traveled to Brevard County, you know we don't have hills. It's actually a man-made structure. It's dirt and concrete, and several feet, if you can imagine, of concrete. And we were doing a project recently where we were putting in concrete reinforcement in these catacombs underneath the pad surface to support them. And in order to do that, we had to drill up into several feet of concrete, and they kept finding random pieces of metal. If you look at all the drawings, you would think it's just concrete, just like several 10 feet of concrete. But the best we can think of is as they were finishing other projects, they were just throwing the steel in. So we found bolts and plates and random pieces that we didn't expect. So it's kind of, these surprises when you go into a historic area. You weren't there when they built it. You don't know why they did things they did, but you always know there was a reason. And it's funny, I kind of chuckle to myself. Sometimes when we do things, a lot of times when you go to fix something, you see something unusual, you come up with a fix, and it looks out of the norm. Everything else is this way, but this one's that way. All of these, we did this, and then this looks like it was added on. And I always chuckle because I know in about 20 years they're going to say, why did they do that? And I just hope that they are so understanding as we are and say, well, there's a reason. There's a reason they did this. And hopefully we'll be around to share the fun stories with them. One of the challenges for GSDO is the fact that we are working in parallel with the vehicle. This has been a struggle throughout Constellation and throughout GSDO and probably the programs that came before this. I used to be more on the flight side, so what happened on the ground always was kind of taken for granted. It would be there when we need it. I have a much better appreciation now, having been at Kennedy for quite a while. And to do that in parallel, you have to make some of these assumptions. The lightning protection system, we had to do that years before the vehicle knew how tall they were going to be, but you have to be able to make those assumptions. And what will happen time and time again is that the vehicle is going to change because the vehicle is also being designed. And as their designs change, we have to change. And unfortunately, we all have to finish at about the same time. So some of these late changes that are coming are difficult to absorb. We get so far down the line that it's difficult to go and start a new project. It's difficult to change a project that's well into construction. And that's a risk that GSDO has always had because we have had to work in parallel with the vehicle. We try to keep up with the changes, but at the same time, while you want to look forward to what may come, you also have to keep focused on what's in front of you so you can keep going. If you sit and wait for the final answer, you'll never get there. So time and time again, we have to just make some assumptions so that we can keep making progress, so that we can keep up with the vehicle and be ready when it was time to launch. If we waited till the vehicle was completely designed, we would never be there. So that is the risk. Sometimes we have to make decisions. Sometimes we have to go back and redo things. And then other times we find something out so late that we have to shift gears and start a new project so that we can accommodate. I have one that I'm finishing up now that was something that we never envisioned. It's a separator tank for the liquid hydrogen. As the SLS design matured and what they knew more and more about what they were going to do with cooling the engines, they realized that they were going to be venting so much more hydrogen, and we couldn't handle that. So we had to put in a project to build a large tank to collect it. It's kind of an above ground septic system. We collect the hydrogen as it warms up, it vents off to the atmosphere, or it goes to the flare stack so it can be burned off. But this was something we never envisioned that we would need, and we didn't know about it until the vehicle was able to mature. And luckily, it was simple enough that we could get it executed in time. But we have to take those risks. We're doing that now for EM2, for Exploration Mission 2. We know enough about the vehicle to know that what they want for liquid hydrogen, we don't have enough. So I'm already designing a new liquid hydrogen tank. We have already a 900,000 gallon tank, and we're designing a 1.4 million gallon tank so that we can get 3 launch attempts for EM2. This is years before we have a final design of what we will actually need. But I can't wait until then in order to execute it. I have to get it started. I have to get into the budget cycle. It takes years to build these things. It takes almost years to design them. And in order to do that, in order to be ready, you have to back it up. You just have to make some good engineering judgments, and you have to proceed in order to do it. One of the other very challenging things that every project has, and based on the size of this, is how large the teams are, is it all comes down to people issues. We focus so much on technical issues, but as a project manager, you love the technical issues. Those are fun. You get to, everybody, we're all engineers, we love working technical issues. Nobody likes working the people issues, but the people issues are the ones that will always get you. You need to put as much energy into working the people issues and investing in developing the people as you do the technical. They'll mention that to you in any project management class you take. They'll say, managing the people is what project management is about. You hear that all the time, but what they don't tell you is how deep and broad that is. It goes from your communication. You can never communicate enough. I get 200 emails a day easily. If somebody sends me an email and then a week later I hear, well, I sent you an email, if it was important enough, we need to have direct conversations, whether it's a phone call or a face-to-face, and you need to get an affirmation back. This one-way communication is something that is so important, isn't very effective. We're all getting bombarded by that. So you can never communicate enough. I can never communicate enough with my management. My management could never communicate enough with me. People need to have information. We are not robots that as things pass us by, we absorb them and understand them. So it's really important to be able to filter that and communicate with your team members and all of your stakeholders. People they have emotions, they have feelings, they have egos. It's important to understand that. And it's also important to understand that people are human outside of work. They have lives, they have, you may have conflict at work, but at the end of the day, they're a person too. And sometimes we need to look back past our technical disagreements and understand that. Because I can tell you, everyone I've worked at, especially working for the space program, and I'm sure there's others that are just the same, I have never met anyone that I did not believe truly wanted to do the right thing. But where the conflicts come in, or where you think, well, this is the right thing, and I think this, something else is the right thing. And it's so important as a project manager to make both sides feel that they're heard and understood. And then you have to make the right decision for the program. And everyone needs that decision, and so that we can move on. Another thing about people is they need that direction. They need decisions. They can't just get, jerked back and forth. They need direction. They need leaders that they can believe in. They need leaders that they feel have their back. And they need leaders that they feel will allow them to do their job to the best that they can do. And at the end of the day, one thing that time and time again, people are human. Humans make mistakes. We cannot prevent every mistake. What's important is not to prevent every mistake, but it's what you do with those mistakes. When my team members come to me and they say, this happened, we made a mistake, and I say, and? I'm not going to yell at them. What I want to hear is what comes next. This is how we're going to fix it. This is how we're going to prevent it again. This is what we learned from it, and this is who we're going to tell so they don't also do the same thing. It's what you do with the mistakes that's important. It's not that you made a mistake, it's what you do about it. And so all of that is about managing the people. And I could go on and on, there's so many aspects to managing the people that we forget about because we focus on the technical, we focus on our budget, we focus on our schedule, but without that underlying management of the people, none of those happen. And when we have problems in those areas, they typically go back to an issue with people. One of the things that I have noticed and with some individuals, and it could be generational, it could be personality, is the lack of wanting to act, to come across like you don't know the answers. We all went through engineering schools. To get here, we were all very type A people. We're all very success oriented. We all want to do a great job. But there has been so many people that have worked around this type of thing, that have seen it before you've seen it, have done it before you've done it. And people are so hesitant to ask questions and to have these personal communications and to say, have you done this before? The shuttle program was so long and successful, and we have so many people that have been through that. There's very few things that come up that someone doesn't know something about it. And a lot of times it's not where you think that the place you would think to go look. So it's so important to talk to people and to share. We see that even within our small groups where we may have a problem, but we don't want to bother, because everyone's so busy, we don't want to bother the other group to tell them what problems we've had, or they don't want to stop what they're doing because they're so busy to ask if anybody else has seen it. We're all going through very, very similar things and having very similar challenges, but we're lacking that where we share that. And people say, well, I put it in a document and I sent it out in an email. Well, most of us don't read it. We don't just sit around the table and talk. People don't want to ask questions, and people don't want to go out and acknowledge that maybe they don't have the right answers or know all the answers. But what we do is so complex and so vast that no one person could do this on their own. We are relying on the knowledge of the people that came before us, and they were relying on the knowledge of the people that came before them, and the same will happen in the future. And we have to do this as a team. It's too big of a task to do as an individual. And when you think that you don't need help is when you're probably the one that does. Because there's somebody out there probably knows something that maybe not answer the whole thing for you, but could certainly help. We tend to do everything because technology is so widely available. We tend to do so much of it. We send so many emails. We send so many texts. But time and time again, messages, I know it happens in my personal life. I text my husband. I think I said one thing. He said he thinks I said something else. Luckily, I'm going to see him in the evening, and we're going to clear it up. It doesn't always happen at work. You don't always follow up with that and say, what did you mean by that? Because you can often take it the wrong way. And we tend to rely on it because it's fast and it's convenient, but we don't do that follow through to make sure that it was understood. And that's where I think that we have to be better at. We have to look at this as we're people. We need to interact with one another.